Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this professional development session of the 2020 virtual Ignatian Family Teach-In for Justice. We'll be talking today a little bit about what it means to be an Ignatian educator for justice. The panel of the three of us will not be giving you the final word on what it means, but rather sharing the reflections of three practitioners on what has worked, what has not worked, and other things in between. So before we begin, I would like to introduce the panel by having each of us introduce ourselves. So we will start with Sarah Braybeck.
My name is Sarah Braybeck. I am the director of the Office of Service and Justice at Jesuit High School in Sacramento, California, and I also teach theology there. I've been, it's my 6th year at Jesuit and my 8th year teaching overall.
Hi, everyone. My name is Crystal Catalan. I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and the Director of Community Involvement at Presentation High School here in San Jose, California. It's not necessarily a Jesuit institution, but we've been involved with ISN for the past few years and very much have similar Ignatian values. So I've been there for about 8 years now, and yeah, it's a great time.
And my name is Sue Baber. I am the Associate PACE for the USA East Province of the Jesuits. That's the education office that supports the schools, the Jesuit schools on the East Coast in issues of mission and identity. I'm in my 1st year in this role. Prior to that, I had been the campus minister and theology department chair at Loyola School in Manhattan. And before that, I was at St. Peter's Prep. I was a Latin teacher at St. Peter's Prep in Jersey City. So it's good to be with you. We will begin our time together by sharing some stories of how we got into this work, what brought us into Ignatian education as work of justice. What was the hook that got us? So maybe Crystal, would you like to start with that one?
Yeah, sure. So prior to my time at Presentation High School, I was actually in formation to become a sister. So I was doing mission work overseas and also domestically in New York as well as Pennsylvania, kind of exploring my vocation, but also I really started off just really thinking about where was God calling me. And I found myself really drawn to the charism of the Cabrini sisters. So Mother Cabrini is the patron saint of immigrants. And it was through that experience living in community with the sisters that I felt really drawn to religious life, but most specifically their work for mission. But it was also during that time, the Cabrini sisters are very much rooted in Ignatian spirituality as well. And I would say that from that experience, that was one of the first times I also had the opportunity to engage in the 19th annotation. And so just from that experience and really as I continued to explore where God was calling me, obviously I'm not a sister now, but after leaving my last mission with them at Cabrini University, I was really thinking about, God, like, where are you calling me next? And I found this awesome job here in San Jose at Presentation High School, which allowed me the opportunity to lead service trips, but then also get students to be involved on mission via their immersion program. And so for me, I felt like this was just a direct connection for me to continue to live out my faith, but then also help and support students and the community in really seeking out their own vocation, as well as engaging in the same types of activities and service opportunities. And so working at Pres in this role, and now I work more so with DEI as well, I feel like I have one of the best jobs because in this role, I feel like my job and ministry is really just to support others and helping to serve others and to really explore ministry together and see how we can be best in community when we're looking out for one another, either here locally or as well as internationally. And I think also, you know, just thinking about the connection between our foundress, Nano Nagel, who is a founder of the presentation order, her motto and our motto for our school is not words, but deeds. And that's very much similar to St. Ignatius, who said, love ought to show itself in deeds more than words. And I feel like that's something that I get to live out every day at Pres. And that's something that I feel I have rooted in who I am as a person as well. So I feel just very privileged and to have the opportunity to see my work as a ministry, especially in this capacity at Pres.
I'm happy to go next. So I was Jesuit educated since high school. So I went to a Jesuit high school in Chicago and then did my undergraduate studies and graduate studies at 2 different Jesuit schools as well. And so was always kind of steeped in this tradition of discernment and working for the greater glory of God, and that we would be, whatever I was doing, whatever it was that I ultimately decided to do with my life would be for the service of others and to work for justice in the world. And so I went to college thinking I was going to be a doctor and was very quickly disabused of that idea, working in a medical clinic the first summer after my freshman year. And so just kind of puttered my way through college courses, just trying to find like what I found really interesting. And for me, that ended up being theology courses. And then did a year of service and ended up in an MDiv program at Santa Clara University. And during that program, I was working at Santa Clara out of their Ignatian Center and doing formation with undergraduates who were leading their immersion program, and went on an immersion with them. And we were stuck in traffic, and this freshman turned to me and said, "Sarah, I really have heard like a lot about this St. Ignatius guy, but I don't know anything about him. Can you tell me like what the deal is?" And for me, it was this moment of like, oh, yes, I can. Like, this is my tradition too. And I get to be part of passing on this story and passing on this vision of what it means to be a person of faith in the world, and invite other people into that. And that has kind of been this memory that I go back to of like, yes, this is a tradition that I'm part of as well as a lay person, that we get to invite other young people into, and that continues to animate my work in high schools of like, how do I just invite other people into this, tell the story that we share, tell the many stories that we share, and continue this living tradition.
Thank you. My story is a little bit different. I would be lying if I were to say I started working in Jesuit education because I wanted to work in Jesuit education. I started working in Jesuit education because I wanted to teach Latin, and Jesuit schools need Latin teachers often. So in many ways, this was kind of a great surprise of the early part of my career. And that commitment really, it started in a lot of ways, but a really profound moment was, it was early in my career when the Jesuits in El Salvador were killed. And I can still remember showing up in school one morning, and in a school that didn't use the PA very often, there was an announcement that this had happened. Please pray for them, and please pray for Jesuits worldwide. So that moment was a really powerful moment, and it prompted a lot of questions. You know, what was their story? What were they doing? Why were they killed? I graduated from Holy Cross, so I could think about those people in terms of people who did similar work, the president of the university, et cetera, and feeling a connection that I didn't understand. So having that happen and learning about them and their work as I was learning and growing in Ignatian spirituality kind of shaped everything. It made that connection between faith and justice just so totally merged in my heart and in my mind, and it shaped everything I did. You know, it made me start asking real questions about, well, how does Latin fit into all of this? Because that's what I was doing at the time. So it was this subtle movement that then had this catalyst moment that just pushed me, inspired me to kind of reimagine what I was doing. And I was surrounded by people who were great companions on that in the building. People who had ideas, people who had the passion for justice and faith. And as I was on my own journey, were really supportive and helped me figure that out. So that's kind of how I got here in a way I never expected to be. Yet within 12 years of that, I was moving to being a campus minister. It's a big change. So we come in different doors, right? We come in different doors with different purposes and different reasons. And we stay on the journey. And I think all three of us could probably talk for a really long time about things that we've done that have just been those moments of transcendence, right? That God is present in this moment, in this experience. So I thought maybe we could start there. What have been a few things that we would call successes in the work that we've done along the way, a moment or a project or a program that affirms the goodness of the work that we're doing?
Yeah, I'll start. One of the first things that comes to mind is when I first started over at Pres, I noticed we did a lot of work on the charity side of things. So we're notoriously known for doing a lot of drives with one of our partner agencies out here. And while that's good and everything, before I started at Pres, I was doing a lot of work with Catholic Relief Services, and advocacy was a huge part of that work that I did. And I thought it was really important to continue that work, especially on the high school level. Sometimes it's hard because students feel like they may not necessarily have a voice or don't necessarily know what to do because they can't vote for things specifically. But as soon as I started at Pres, I really felt like there was opportunity to introduce what advocacy is, what it looks like, and how even students who are not of voting age in the political system can still advocate on behalf of different issues such as hunger or any parts of legislation. And so something that I was able to kind of start up with our students is to form an advocacy team. So really thinking about, those 2 feet of justice, of obviously like charity and then the social justice side of things was something that I really, really wanted to focus on with my students. So sharing with them how important it is to advocate, whether it's by writing letters or making phone calls to our state legislators like we do during the teach-in on that Monday during lobby day. That was something that I wanted to provide an experience with for all of our students. So I would recall that at some of our initial school-wide assemblies when we were really kicking this off, giving them an opportunity to write a letter and then to pray over the letters and then send those letters out really as a community advocacy piece. So really thinking about how students can get involved in the advocacy process was, I think, a really big win and success in the sense that now students are asking, hey, what can we really serve to advocate for this month or the next month? Or Ms. Callahan, there is this big issue that I really care about. Can we set up some letter writing stations, things like that? So I would say that's one of the successes. And I would say just generally, anytime students just come into the office and say like, hey, Ms. Cat, like, can I process with you an idea I have about something, or something came up, whether it's about gun violence or just different things that have been coming up. Anytime those conversations happen, like talk about just moments of grace. I really feel like that's a huge gift because in those conversations, I'm able to also integrate faith into those conversations, really talk about the intersection of faith and action. I think those are huge successes. And those are things that I really just appreciate and really hold strong to, in the sense that I'm able to have these conversations within this Catholic institution, which is not often that, I can have that opportunity to have those conversations. We're at a non-religious affiliated school. So I would say that those are the main ones that stick out to me when I think about what's been successful in this role.
I think something that worked in ways I never expected it to work was in a senior social justice class. I decided that everybody knows the term men and women for others, and at least at the school I was at the time, very few people read the document. So with this group of seniors, we did this whole exercise on brainstorming and individual brainstorming and collective brainstorming. What does it mean to be a man or a woman for others? And they came up with some lovely, lovely definitions. They said, okay, those are great, and they're all good. They're all part of it. And then we read the document, and we read part of it together in the classroom, part of it they read at home with reflection questions. And when we got to the end of it, we were talking about the 3 things that Arupe identifies as, what does it mean? What does it mean? And I just said, which of those three things is hardest, do you think, to accomplish, to achieve, to live? And they just had this fantastic discussion that extended for the period, for several class days, about what's so hard in our context today about living simply, or what does it mean to challenge unjust structures, and then to the value questions of, well, does it really matter to challenge the structures, because will the structures ever change? And my goal when we had started had really been the modest goal of just understanding the phrase a little more deeply, and how it is connected to faith, and how it's a little bit more than holding the door or lending a book, or those are all good. And they really went to a place that I think any adult in the room would have just said, this is remarkable. Another thing that was a success in a surprising way was, we were talking about socially responsible investing, and they didn't, what does that mean? How does that work? And we went through a lot of information. We had the Provincial System for Social Ministries come in and talk to them and do some work with them. And that was early in the semester. And we got to the end of the semester, and one of the students stops in my office one day just to say, you know, after we did that stuff on socially responsible investing, I kind of did a stock market club, because the school has a stock market club. I did a stock market club, a little portfolio of responsible investing just for me, just to see how it worked. And he's like, you know, I actually made a profit. And, you know, for that student to take that initiative, I wish he had told me sooner, and we could have brought more people into it. But for me, those are the moments that are successful, when kids or adults think they know something, and they know about something, and then they go deeper, or they see it from a new perspective. You know, seeing investing as a socially responsible force. You know, this was probably 8 or 9 years ago that we did that. Realizing that men and women for others goes beyond just being a nice person. It's that personal appropriation or reimagining of something that we already know, that I think is where the greatest success comes from, because it's not us telling them, this is what you should think, this is what we should do. It's them discovering it for themselves.
Yeah, those are such great examples to listen to. Two things come to mind for me, and one is just like a story about a student from a few years ago. It was 4 years ago, because it was during the 2016 election, and it was Spirit Week, and so our students had free dress, and it was like Red, White, and Blue Day. And a student came to class wearing a shirt that said #BuildTheWall. And I saw it as he walked in, and other students were filing in, and another student saw it and just looked at me and was like, you know, rolled his eyes and sat down. And so, you know, I'm processing like, okay, other students are seeing this. How do I respond to this in a way that cares for the students who are hurt by this, and cares for this student as well, and invites him into something deeper. And so I just went over and I said, you know, hey, could you tell me about your shirt? And his friend was like, oh, it's a campaign shirt. I was like, yes, thank you. Thank you. Very good. Sophomores, you know, like still sometimes pretty base level. And he said, oh, I just kind of think it's like a funny shirt. And a week before in class, we were doing the Exodus, and I had used a New York Times, there's an op doc about teenage migrants from Guatemala trying to cross over the border into the US. And we'd watched that documentary and kind of looked for parallels between the stories, and had kind of unpacked it. And he'd written this beautiful reflection on how, you know, he really thought it was important to follow the laws and migrate legally when that was a possibility, but that in watching that story and learning about those teenagers and recognizing that he was the same age, that he knew that if he were in that same position, he would do the very same thing. Which I just thought was, you know, like this real place of honesty for a teenager. And so I just said to him, you know, I just held those things up to each other and I just said, you wrote this really beautiful reflection and you're wearing this shirt, and those things seemed at odds with each other. And those kids that you really cared about, those are the kids who get hurt by that policy or that policy proposal. And he just kind of paused and was like, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way. And later in the year, right, came back to talk about it. And so Crystal, what you were saying about like just having that space where kids know that they can come and talk and express ideas and think through things in greater depth. And then like even later the next year, he ended up going to like a protest at the Capitol around gun violence, like speaking on the megaphone. And I mean, like just real transformation on his part. So I think back to that memory of just like, how do we care for, make sure it's clear to all the students that this is a safe place for them, that like that kind of verbal violence like isn't okay, but then also caring for that student who may or may not be aware of the impact of his actions and what he's doing or saying. So that's one. And then I just think too about creating spaces, the work that I've done, and it's ongoing, to create spaces for student leadership in the service and justice world. That has not been a big part of our school's life. And so carving out those spaces. So this year, having them co-lead our Summit on Human Dignity, where we're focusing on race and identity, and having a leadership team of students who are really helping craft that vision and speak to their peers. And we had a professor from Sac State come and talk to them this week and give a presentation on intercultural competence, and then just had a conversation the next day about, like, why is it like that they said, all lives matter is really a hurtful thing to say. And the student was like, I just thought that was a good thing because all lives do matter. And so just watching him like unpack why that's problematic, because it's not just a neutral statement, it's in response to, right? Like, and so just working and walking alongside of them as they unpack that different work.
We started with the successes, and in addition to successes, we've had misses along the way, because if we're doing our jobs well, we're taking risks on things that we're doing. And when we take risks, we end up with misses, or sometimes we just miss because we miss. So the next few reflections we'll share will be some things that we might have missed, either moments or plans that didn't play out the way we had hoped they would. When I think of my own work at Loyola, particularly the work with ISN, we started going to the Teach-In in 2006. So that was a big piece of what we did every year. We didn't start doing the advocacy until very recently. It's only been the past few years when we've done the advocacy, either while we were in DC or locally. And there were all sorts of good reasons along the way why we weren't doing the advocacy. The biggest issue being finding the time to do the appropriate preparation ahead of time. I could get kids ready for where they were going and what we were doing and why we were doing it. But the work of the advocacy preparation, finding the time to build that into the planning piece, was a big challenge. And, it was a miss, and it was very clearly a miss. And we finally started because we started out small one year. We started out locally, and on the day that the group went to Senator Schumer's office, he was actually in the office and came out and spoke to the students for a couple of minutes. So they were just like, we talked to Senator Schumer. So I feel like that was a programmatic and philosophical miss. We were talking about advocacy. We were with students. Use your voices, use the tools you have at your disposal. And yet here was this incredible opportunity. And we would often stay for the public witness and then leave. So that was, I think, a huge miss in programming. It was not quite a blind spot, but it was a spot that, when making choices, it seemed like it was a good choice to make in terms of what we weren't doing. And so I think that was a significant loss for our students who were attending the Teach-In.
I'm happy to go next. I was looking back over, my 8 years of teaching, which for many people is like, I'm still a baby. But I was thinking about my first year in the classroom, and the real miss I realize is that I did not do enough work to unpack my own biases and to be conscious of how that would manifest itself in the classroom. And I didn't have enough of an appreciation of the power that I had by virtue of being a teacher and being in the position that I was in. It was my first job. I was feeling very ill-equipped and incompetent most of the time. But for those students, I was just an authority figure. I was a teacher and a person of leadership in the school. And so I think back about, the real instances of harm, either microaggressions or, just different ways that those biases that I have that I hadn't adequately looked at did harm to students. So that's one example. And then I think, yeah, it's important to think about. I think too about our immersion program now at Jesuit. And I think, immersion programs have such potential to do real good and to introduce students to things that they wouldn't otherwise know about. And then I also have this experience of being aware of the fact that they have potential to do, to reinforce stereotypes, to support programs and structures that don't interrogate structures of injustice and really just support charity. And so actually feeling somewhat, if there's a silver lining to COVID, feeling grateful for this opportunity to pause on immersions and really interrogate, like, what are we doing? And is this helping us achieve the goals that we have?
Sarah, I was legit going to talk about like two of those same things. So just picking off of those points that you were making, specifically with the immersion trips, something that I think is a missed opportunity. And I mean, in all humility, sometimes it still happens, are the post-trip meetings, right? Like our students go on these amazing immersion trips. They have great preparation. They have a very inspiring, world-changing, life-changing experience that they just articulate with us. And then they come back to their everyday life. And then we have maybe 1 or 2 post-trip meetings, but then what? Right. And I think that's a lot of like the missed opportunity, is because we'll have conversations about how important it is. But then it's right, like going through the school year, it's on to like the next thing or planning the next trip. And luckily I'll have like 1 or 2 students that'll still keep that fire going within them. But oftentimes it just gets lost. And so I think that's a continual missed opportunity that we're always continually trying to explore on how to keep that engagement going. And so as a result of some of those needs, we've instituted like an advocacy piece that needs to happen right after the immersion trips. But then after the advocacy piece, after that programming takes place, then what, right? And so I think that's a continual learning thing that we're trying to figure out in our office, so that we are maintaining the integrity of these trips. Like, just as you mentioned, Sarah, like these are amazing opportunities, but sometimes they can do some harm too. And that's our responsibility when we're bringing groups of students onto these trips and these experiences. So that's one thing. And then another thing I was thinking about missed opportunities are, just reflecting on my role at Pres with DEI work, but then also as I'm trying to learn more about my own identity as a non-Black person of color, really thinking about what are those moments when I have felt empowered to have a conversation with a student or maybe even a colleague on something that was said that maybe was harmful either to me or another community member. And it makes me think of what are those moments when I feel empowered and when are those moments when I don't feel empowered, and then what harm takes place because that conversation does not happen, right? And that opportunity to call in as opposed to calling out, when I just let that go, then what? Where's the learning that could happen from that? So I continue to reflect on those opportunities whenever they present themselves, because it gives me a chance to reflect on where do I need to grow so that I can be more bold in my convictions, but then also speak truth to that which I'm trying to model for our students as well, but then also with my fellow colleagues too.
All right, that's part of the work. There's the work with the students, there's the work with our colleagues, and there's the work with the parents as well, all of whom are in different places. And part of the work is figuring out where people are and working with them where they are, and truly working with them, as opposed to just wanting them to be where we are, but dignifying where they are in an effort to bring them to a place that's kind of more aligned with a just world. You know, we've gone from successes to missed opportunities, and maybe the most important question is what's the hope, right? Thinking about the theme of the teach-in, the prophetic resilience, breaking down and building up. What does that mean? Where do we see hope in what we are doing or in what we have done? Because we are, as Christians, we are people of hope.
I mean, part of my hope is sitting on the floor next to me, you know, just being able to see the world through a toddler's eyes every day is reorienting and reinvigorating. But I think within the province, I've really taken a lot of consolation and hope from the collaboration that's been happening here in Jesuits West since March. There's just been a ton of energy and goodwill, even when people, sorry, come here. Oh, come here. I know. Even when people are, you know, maxed out and home with kids and trying to keep it all together, really supporting each other and inviting each other into collaborative programs and ideas. And that has just been a real source of deep consolation in the midst of an otherwise really challenging time.
Yeah, I think for me, my hope, at least, is that we would continue to have these discussions with one another, that collaboration would take place, that we would take time to break down our typical or normal ways of thinking and continue to challenge maybe ourselves, but then also one another in thinking differently, and thinking how we can be truly more of an inclusive community for all, so that all voices could be heard, but then also that we will remain centered on justice, love, and mercy. And I think that it's important to recognize that we can't do this work alone. So my hope is that we would continue to each try to learn what are the ways that we can build authentic community with one another at our schools, but then also across schools, right? And then, you know, within this network as well. I think we're that much stronger together, as cheesy as that may sound, but I think that there's a lot of truth to that too. There's obviously a lot of energies for different social justice topics. We can't give 150% to every topic, but I think that, you know, if we work with one another and remain centered on these really important gospel values, we can do something and make something really beautiful and try to create that heaven here on earth. So yeah, my hope also just lies in the fact that we get to work, or I at least get to work with high school students who are passionate about so many more social justice issues than maybe even like 5 years ago. And so my hope is in them too, just hearing the various topics that they bring up and clearly have passions for making a change in. So
my hope comes from a few places, and part of it is, Crystal, following up on what you just said, young people today have so much greater a sense of their own agency in terms of making their voices heard than was true, I think, 5 years ago. You know, and I think certainly we've seen that globally in climate conversations, but even locally during the summer, I live in Jersey City, New Jersey, and there was a really wonderful rally that was planned by high school students, run by high school students. And the first speaker just said, yeah, I sent a text to my friends and I said I wanted to sponsor a protest, and how do you go about doing it? And it was prayerful, thoughtful, and intelligent, and completely run by young people. There were very few adults who were anywhere near the microphone or behind the scenes making it happen. It was a group of teenagers who had planned this. The other thing that gives me incredible hope, right? I've moved from a campus ministry office that was literally in the middle of the student commons area and kind of in the world of kids, very much into the world of adults. My work right now is to work with the adults in our schools as they support students. And in the space of the now close to 2 months that I've been in this role, I have so much deeper an appreciation of what's going on across schools. You know, I could speak very confidently about several different schools. In New York City, we have some schools pretty close together, and I could speak confidently about what's happening in those schools. But just to see the breadth and depth of the initiatives and the thoughtfulness and the creativity across the schools of this province, some in particular in response to the questions of how do we keep the justice conversations and the work going when we are remote or hybrid and we can't have students out doing what would ordinarily have been those service programs that are so important in terms of breaking down stereotypes. But the conversations surrounding the deepening of it, you know, Sarah, as you were saying, on the province level, there's incredible work being done and there's an incredible sharing of resources. And, you know, I feel like if that becomes our way of working together moving forward, we really have that much more wealth across the schools. You know, we have the richness in each institution, but we also have the richness that goes far beyond that comes from collaboration and from the shared sense of mission. So that gives me an incredible hope. So it also gives me hope that people are buying into the virtual teach-in, right? You know, I think we would all rather be together in Washington in November. But since that wasn't going to happen, you know, I think ISN has been incredibly committed to finding new ways of bringing us together. And again, the creativity that goes into that doesn't end with this. It becomes a new tool to add to the work that we do. So I thank everyone for viewing this. Crystal and Sarah, I thank you for saying yes to the invitation to be part of the panel. And thank you all. I wish you well, and I hope we see you for our conversation.
Bye, everyone. Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks, Sue. Bye, Crystal. Good to see you.
Bye.